learning a lot about how Yahweh feels when his children turn from him and engage in unrighteousness. So let's go ahead and get started. In the 16th chapter of Ezekiel, we have been reading about our Father's feelings regarding the unbelievable, abominable idolatries, which he likens to whoredoms that his covenanted city of Jerusalem, which of course means his children, has committed. So there we be chastisement and recompense come upon her according to her ways. I think this would better read, so there we see chastisement and recompense come upon her according to her ways. It seems to be a difficult concept for some people to understand that there is a negative side to Yahweh's overall plan. However, even common sense, if you can find any today, declares that disobedient children must receive correction from their parents, else they become spoiled, as in rotten eggs. So, if a parent truly loves his or her child, then he or she will see to it that correction is meted out fairly and in accordance with the severity of the child's transgression. And there is no parent who loves his children more than our Father. We need always remember that when we read about the chastisement that it brings upon his people, it is for the good of their souls, toward their salvation and bringing them back to their Father who loves them. In today's study, we will read that Yahweh has made an eternal covenant with the city of Jerusalem, and no matter how perverse or filthy she has been or yet becomes, even when the abomination of desolation stands on her temple hills, declaring he is Christ, when the final judgment of the condition of men's soul is concluded at the great white throne judgment, he will keep that covenant and he will come to dwell at that location he has chosen to be with his people forever and ever. Revelation 21, verse 2. And I saw John, the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. Verse 3, And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of Elohim is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and Yahweh himself shall be with them, and be their Yahweh. Verse 4, And Yahweh shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. There is a restoration coming, and at the conclusion of this chapter 16, our Father will once again remind us that so that we can always keep focused on the positive outcome of his loving and merciful plan being worked out here on earth. Meanwhile, back at the brothel ranch, things have deteriorated all around the great city. Ezekiel 16, verse 44. Behold, every one that useth proverbs shall use this proverb against thee, saying, As is the mother, so is her daughter. The proverb we use today is, history repeats itself, which actually means, if you think about it, that history is prophecy. You see, we are to learn from these types and examples that happened of old so that we can know with certainty what to expect in these last days. Paul told us that in 1 Corinthians 10:11, Now all these things happen unto them for ensamples, and they are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. Let's see what happened concerning Jerusalem, who turned into a whore after Yahweh married her. Verse 45, Thou art thy mother's daughter, that loatheth her husband and her children, and thou art the sister of thy sisters, which loathe their husbands and their children. Your mother was a Hittite, and your father an Amorite. Jerusalem sure turned out to be the true daughter of her no-good heathen Hittite mother, just like, actually worse, than her sister cities around her. Ezekiel 16, verse 46. And thine elder sister is Samaria, she and her daughters that dwell at thy left hand, and thy younger sister that dwelleth at thy right hand is Sodom and her daughters. Samaria became the capital of the 10 northern tribes of Israel, where Jeroboam made idolatrous images of calves to worship. And Sodom, well, you know about Sodom. Verse 47, Yet hast thou not walked after their ways, nor done after their abominations? But as if that were a very little thing, thou wast corrupted more than they in all thy ways. The sins of her sisters and the villages around them were minor compared to the corruption of Jerusalem. Ezekiel 16, verse 48. As I live, saith Yahweh Elohim, Sodom thy sister hath not done, she nor her daughters, as thou hast done, thou and thy daughters. Verse 49. Behold, this was the iniquity of thy sister Sodom. Pride, fullness of bread, and abundance of idleness was in her and in her daughters, neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor and needy. Her sister Sodom was lustful and prideful and lazy and selfish. Verse 50, And they were haughty and committed abomination before me. Therefore I took them away as I saw good. Furthermore, they committed their sins with an in-your-face Yahweh attitude. That will get you wiped off the map, as they found out the hard way. Our country is ever increasing with the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah, and if we don't do something about it, Yahweh will. Remember, history is prophecy. Peter even said so in 2 Peter 2, verse 6, quote, And turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemn them with an overflow, making them an ensample unto those after should live ungodly. It is written, verse 51, Neither hath Samaria committed half of thy sins, but thou hast multiplied thy abominations more than they, and hast justified thy sisters in all thine abominations which thou hast done. You see, Jerusalem claimed she was godly and righteous, while the heathen didn't claim to be of Yahweh. The hypocrisy itself multiplied her abominations. Ezekiel 16, verse 52. Thou also, which hast judged thy sisters, bear thine own shame for thy sins that thou hast committed more abominable than they. They are more righteous than thou. Yea, be thou confounded also, and bear thy shame, in that thou hast justified thy sisters. Jerusalem looked down upon and judged her sister Sodom for her sins. Meanwhile, she is many times more the spiritual whore than she was a physical one. Yes, the little old church-goers of today look down upon and would never be caught near a brothel, when the spiritual whorehouse they sit in is much more disgusting to our Father. They look down upon those sots drunken with Thunderbird and Budweiser, yet they themselves are drunken with the wine of fornication, which they sip directly from the golden chalice cup of Babylon, as it is written. Revelation 17, verse 4. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. This woman is the exact Jerusalem, symbolic of false religion, that we are reading of in Ezekiel is documented 14 verses later in Revelation 17, verse 18, quote, "And the women which thou sawest in that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth." Yes, after a few sips of 1830 vintage Rapture imported from Glasgow, Scotland, along with a couple of hard-boiled traditional Ishtar eggs, you'll soon be so intoxicated you'll be gobbling and speaking in unintelligible syllables and claiming the Holy Spirit made you do it. Worse yet, you'll think you are a good little Christian. Of course, it's not what we think that counts. Fortunately, if you have made it thus far in the book of Ezekiel, then no one has to tell you what Yahweh thinks, right? Ezekiel 16, verse 53. "When I shall bring again their captivity, and captivity of Sodom and her daughters, and the captivity of Samaria and her daughters, then will I bring again the captivity of thy captives in the midst of them." Yeshua will soon return, and he will restore Jerusalem and Sodom and Samaria, etc. Verse 54, "That thou mayest bear thine own shame, and mayest be confounded in all that thou hast done, in that thou art a comfort unto them." The shame of Sodom and Gomorrah will not be near as bad as that of Jerusalem. Again, the spiritual whoredom is much worse. Here's what Yeshua said, Luke 10, verse 12, "But I say unto you that it shall be more tolerable in that day for Sodom than for that city." Verse 55, "When thy sister Sodom and her daughters shall return to their former estate, and Samaria and her daughters shall return to their former estate, then thou and thy daughters shall return to your former estate." The restoration all happens at the same time. Verse 56, "For thy sister Sodom was not mentioned by thy mouth in the day of thy pride." Quote, "In your proud days you held Sodom in unspeakable contempt, but now your greater wickedness has been exposed to all the world." That's from the Living Bible. Verse 57, "Before thy wickedness was discovered, as at the time of thy reproach of the daughters of Syria, and all that are round about her, the daughters of the Philistines which despise thee round about." Note, in Hebrew, the word for Syria means Aram. However, the Daleth, the letter D, and the Resh, the letter R, are very similar in appearance in Hebrew and can be easily mistaken one for the other. There is some discrepancy, therefore, as to which letter should be used, because some codices have a D instead of an R and read Adam instead of Aram. It was Jerusalem, the descendants of Adam, who was reproached by all those round about her. Ezekiel 16, verse 58, "Thou hast borne thy lewdness and thine abominations, saith the Lord." The whore just loves religion and even carries a Bible to give her traditions of men added value and make them appear holy, as if they came from him when in fact they did not. She is deluded indeed. Verse 59, "For thus saith Yahweh Elohim, I will even deal with thee as thou hast done, which hast despised the oath in breaking the covenant." Yahweh did not break the covenant with Jerusalem and his people. They broke it. But as we noted in the beginning of this study, Yahweh always keeps his word when he makes a covenant. Ezekiel 16, verse 60, "Nevertheless, I will remember my covenant with thee in the days of thy youth, and I will establish unto thee an everlasting covenant." Our Father never breaks a promise, When he makes an everlasting, eternal covenant, it's a done deal. Verse 61, Then thou shalt remember thy ways and be ashamed. Then thou shalt receive thy sisters, thine elder and thy younger, and I will give them unto thee for daughters, but not by thy covenant. Can't you just envision everyone standing there? Sinners from Sodom along with those religious folk from Jerusalem, and the self-righteous are more naked and more embarrassed because of their recompense was greater in measure than the sinners they condemned and looked down upon. Ezekiel 16:62. And I will establish my covenant with thee, and thou shalt know that I am Yahweh. Verse 63. That thou mayest remember and be confounded, and never open thy mouth any more because of thy shame, when I am pacified toward thee, for all that thou hast done, saith Yahweh Elohim. At the sound of the seventh trump, Yeshua Christ will return to the Mount of Olives to rule with his saints for 1,000 years. And as we read in Revelation 21, Jerusalem, his chosen and covenanted location, will be our Father's eternal home when all things are restored and all wickedness is consumed in the lake of fire. Oh, happy day. That'll be a marvelous day, won't it? Though there was and is yet to be shame and hurt and pain until the time of restoration, we know that our Father is a God of love and that his plan is a positive one, and that we can look forward to spending eternity with him in the new city of Jerusalem. Okay, that concludes our study of the 16th chapter of Ezekiel. Next time we'll pick it up with chapter 17. Until then, Yahweh bless you.